Hello everyone, Troy here with I guess it's a how-to video. What I've done here is I've picked up some remote tortoise mounts for my layout. I need them for my yard. I picked these up from Pfeiffer Hobby and Supply, and I figured I'd show you guys how to go ahead and install these and how to go ahead and get everything prepped out and get them all ready. First thing I've already actually got this right here open. First thing that you'll notice is all the parts that are actually sitting here. For this step, I guess all you really need is a screwdriver, which I actually kind of forgot to go ahead and grab. And just take and cut open these bags. What I do is I just open up all the screws. There's a couple different styles of screws in here. There's a coarse thread. I believe these are all aluminum screws. The short coarse thread will go for the actual remote tortoise mount. Then there's another one here at the bottom of the bag. It's got your actual cable with the steel rod that comes through there. It's a piece of piano wire, and at the bottom of it, it's got a brass tube and some more screws. One of the things that I do is there's some longer screws that actually come inside the package. I myself just discard all those. Let's take all the parts out of the package, if I can even open it here. Whoops. Get all these parts out. These longer screws are used for the base of the remote tortoise mount for screwing on the top of the layout. I myself, I don't use those. So the first thing I do is I use a 5/8 number 6 screw, and I take a 9/64 drill bit, and I will drill out the 4 corners of the remote tortoise mount. So we'll go ahead and we'll drill those right there out really quick. All you have to do is just run the drill in, run it back out again. And then you're done and ready to go. So the number 6 bits, I use 5/8 because if you go any shorter, you really don't have a whole lot of room. But a number 6 by 5/8 screw will work just fine. It's a nice wood screw. It'll grab nice and easy. So the first thing that I do is I will take the coarse threaded screws. You got all these holes down here. Well, you got 4 holes that are kind of perpendicular here to each other. Those 4 screws actually go to the plate to hold on to the tortoise. So what I do is I go ahead and I get the first 2 screws started up in there. We'll get these going here. Get the second one in. Now once I get those started, then you can put on the actual mounting plate for the tortoise itself. Please note that there is a smooth side and there is a rough side. Okay, this is from all the pores and how they make this mold. Okay, the side that they actually use for the mold, the side with the X, goes towards the hole for your actuator. Because the tortoise will mount on the other side. So what you do then is you go ahead and you slide it up into them 2 screws. Then on the other side, you'll install the other 2 screws to hold the plate up into place. We'll get those put on. Now these 2 right here I'll actually tighten right on up. Be careful, you don't want to over tighten these. These screws are only made out of aluminum, I believe, and the heads will probably end up popping off if you try to over tighten these at all. And then you're only going to have 3 screws holding it on if you happen to pop one off. So you want to make sure that they're nice and snug. Don't worry, these tortoises, they're not going to go ahead and go anyplace. Just make sure that they're nice and snug that are going up on there. Okay, then you'll notice that you'll have just a few screws left over. These 4 long screws, once again, I discard those screws. Those screws are null and void for me. I will not use those. Okay, the next step is you have a slider bar. The slider bar will just sit right down here on top of this, and sit right down inside of here. This right here is what your arm is going to be running on, and your cable is going to come up through here. Okay, this is the arm. Now, when you install your arm, as you're holding on to your base plate, you want to make sure that this little notch is going up and over this part of the actuator. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but there's a high spot there. And you want that part of that notch to be able to ride up over towards that side of it. Okay, that's so that there's enough movement there. And on the other side of the bar, there's actually a raised edge. This raised edge goes up toward next to the tortoise. So when you go to mount the tortoise, it will sit up on there nice and flush. Okay. Now, per specs with the remote mount tortoise machine, they say hole number 2. Okay. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm an N scaler, and I have found that hole number 2, which is the second hole on the arm and the second hole on the base plate, to work the best for me. This way here you don't have any overthrow. You're not going to be trying to stretch out that cable or put too much pressure on the cable. Once again, you just want to be able to go ahead and throw that turnout to open it and close it. And I better go ahead and clarify here. Now on this, being that this is a moving piece, you got 2 screws that have a shoulder on them. Now then 2 screws right there at the shoulder will actually be the screws that you use for this bar. One goes in for that second hole, the other one goes up to the tortoise. So you'll take and run that screw in. Now this screw, you do not want this tight. You want it to be nice and snug, but you do not want this tight. If you get it too tight, why, you can't move that thing. So what I do is I'll tighten it up, and then I'll take it, I'll just back it off just a little bit, and move it accordingly. Make sure it moves nice and freely. If you think that there's still a little bit there, loosen it up a little bit. That thing should move really nice on there. I should be able to flop around really nice and easy, just like this. You should be able to go ahead and just take this and just kind of shake it around, and it should be able to go ahead and fall back and forth. It should move really nice on there. Now, the next step that I do, and you could probably do this beforehand, is you got these little clips. If you look at the bottoms of these clips, which you guys probably can't see, one of them has, well, they both have little grooves cut up inside of them. One of them has a deep groove, one of them has a shallow groove. Now the one with the deep groove goes to the outside, which is the actual mount to the base plate. So what you'll want to do, and what I found has been easier for me, is I actually just put the screw inside of here first, because I noticed that they didn't, when Circuitron made these, they didn't drill out the hole big enough so you can actually slide it up into place. So I'll run this screw in first. And you'll go ahead and you'll stick that piece up on there. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see, which is not quite the easiest. What I'll do is I'll tighten that down just a little bit. I won't go down too far. I'll get it just so that the grooves are up into place, and then I can go ahead and still be able to slide a cable up through there. The case to the cable will slide through here, and then the cable itself will ride up over here on the arm. So then, whoops. So then I'll take the next piece and do the same thing with it for the cable. Now some of you guys might be asking, well, do you need to clean up all them burrs and them plastic pieces that are sitting up on there? No, you really don't have to worry about any of them plastic pieces unless you really want to go ahead and clean them up. If it's not something you're going to be working on or being up under, since it's up underneath the layout and stuff, I myself, there's a few areas where I've cleaned them up only because of right where they're located at. If I happen to be reaching up underneath to grab a hold of a hidden train or something like that, then I've went ahead and actually cleaned them up. So then you'll go ahead and you'll wind up with something like this. Now you're going to have a couple more screws here. There's 4 more screws, and those 4 screws go to the actual remote for the actual Tortoise. Now I've got one here already done. Now I'll show you guys what they look like. I'll put them other 4 screws in accordingly up onto the Tortoise, both sides. And once again, remember that one screw with the shoulder on it, because that screw with that shoulder is going to allow for this to pivot. You do not want this screw tight along with the other screw. Remember, for your pivoting arm, you want it to move nice and freely. So make sure that this right here can actually move, because when it reaches the end of the throw, if you watch it, that screw will actually move just a little bit. So being that I'm an N scale, this is what I end up with. Number 2 position on the throw bar. Make sure your screws are nice and snug, not overly tight. And this is the beginning of installing a remote Tortoise mount. Now I'll go ahead and I'll do a second video, and that right there will be actually installing the actuator. Now there ain't nothing to the actuator. All it is just a little bit of a plate. You'll have an arm. You'll have a brass tube. There it is. A brass tube. You'll be drilling a 1/16 hole, approximately 2 ties back from the actual throw bar of your turnout. Then you'll have a steel rod, which I have actually left inside the package. Don't know if you guys can see that yet. So we'll go ahead, we'll stop this video. I'll go through with a part 2 on this, on how to install a remote Tortoise mount. And this same thing applies for any type of crossovers that you want to use or anything else. These things work really nice, but once again, check your throw. Some of you guys that are in HO, you guys might want a little bit longer throw. There's several different settings on this. I myself have not quite played with them all. I just know that for my application in N scale, I'm running Payco and Atlas turnouts, and this position 2 on the mounting plate and position 2 on the throw bar work perfect for me. It doesn't give them too much throw. It does not put too much pressure up there in on that cable when you go ahead and go to install everything. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned. We're going to go ahead and do the second half of installing a remote Tortoise mount on your layout. Hello everyone, I'm back here again with the remote Tortoise install with the actuator. The next step that you want to do is you'll have a brass tube that requires a 1/16 drill bit, and I'm installing a number 4 Payco turnout, and this is all for my yard. And what I do is I use a number 71 drill bit, which is just a tad bit bigger than the actual actuating rod that goes through. And what I will do is drill my hole coming through my throw bar for the remote actuator. It's one of the first steps that I do. Once I get that hole drilled out, I will then use a drill guide. This goes from, I believe it's 1/16 to a 1/4 inch. A friend of mine made these up. I never realized how important it was to have a drill guide on something like this until I installed my first one, so I kind of live and learn. It didn't quite turn out the way I expected it to, and ended up having to redo it. So what I do is I just go ahead and I'll stick this at the end of my drill bit. Run my drill bit all the way through it for right now. Whoops. I will get it down into the center of right where I want to drill. Now, per Circuitron specifications, it's 2 railroad ties back. So what I'll do is I'll get it right where I want it. I'll pull this back up, run it back down, pick it up, double check it, make sure I'm nice and square. This is the most important part of installing a remote Tortoise mount. Hold this thing nice and firmly. We'll drill through. Now once we are drilled through, we can clean it up there a little bit, just blow that little bit right there off. Then with your brass tube, you will take your brass tube and drop your brass tube down through there, through the hole. I don't like to remount these holes. I'd like to have them just a little bit tight. You'll take this tube and you'll push it just so it's flush with the very top of the tie. I went back 2 ties, and when I drill right next to the tie is what I end up doing. Now the next step is we have now drilled this throw bar. So now I got my throw bar sitting here. Make sure that this rod, the actuating rod, will go through my hole. Then I will take my pliers and bend just a very little bit off the tip. Once again, this is end scale, everybody. I will then bend the tip of this. You don't need much, just a little bit. Get that down into a 90-degree bend. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Not quite a 90-degree bend, so we'll bend it just a little bit more. Make sure it's at 90 degrees. Now with that bar, this tube down inside there, I will take this 90-degree bend, put it in, right where I drilled through the throw bar, right there in the center. Sometimes these things are kind of a pain in the butt. Once again, I don't like to make the holes any bigger than I have to. Just how I do it. Now once you have that into place, I will take and center out my points and get this right up over the top of the hole. Now when you bend this, make sure your pliers are back from that tube just a little bit. Otherwise you'll wind up bending it too long. You have to adjust for the thickness of the rod as well. So then I will go right next to it. I'll grab a hold of it with my pliers. Whoops. Make sure all my connections are all nice and tight. I'll go right next to the tube. I will pull this back up out of the throw bar, making sure I don't let go of it. And I'll just give it a twist so it's at 90 degrees. And then I'll go ahead and make my bend, making sure that it's all nice and tight right up against the pliers. That right there will also be a 90-degree bend. So you wind up with something like this. And you will slide this down through the hole. Hopefully this works the first time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Just have to make your bends accordingly. You'll grab a hold of it, push it down through your throw bar. Now I have some other ones here. There we go. Now I have some other ones here. They're done. Here's one here. This one is complete. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. But there's the bend. Goes down through the center of the throw bar. Once again, this is a Payco. So being it's a panko turnout, I just used a hole from the spring that's located up underneath there and bent this accordingly. And I'll do the same thing with these. This will be a crossover, so I only need one tortoise and one cable and actuator to run both turnouts at the same time. After you get done with that part of it, you can actually pull that rod right back out of there. Make sure your tube is still there. Pull that right there back out. You will then go underneath the layout. I'm going to take you guys over here where I got some of this stuff already going. You guys will have to excuse me here for a second. I've already got some of these already installed. And I'm going to try to go and get you guys into another location. Please bear with me. While I crawl up and through the layout. Now this is part of my yard. So now the next step is you will have a long tube that comes through, and you will have your actuator lever. Here is the actuator lever, which will go onto the actual actuator. You got the tip. You will take and slide that up inside there. That's how that right there will work. So it'll sit up in there like this. Whoops, there we go. Okay. But we'll take this, make sure that that bar is off, so you have just an open hole. Bear with me here, guys. When that tube comes out, it will be long. I'm going to slide in a long one here as I've already got these ones cut and ready to go. Just for video purposes. This tube will be long. So what you'll do is you'll slide this piece up and over the tube. Whoops. I have to grab another one here. You'll have to slide this up over the tube. Make sure it's centered out. Mark out your holes. Make sure you got it right where you want it. I myself like to put the cable going to the direction that I want to go with my tortoise. And at the same time while it's up there, if you can see this mark, that is my center mark, which is center of the actuator. Okay? So now once you go ahead and you get that piece marked off, you'll then cut off this tube, and then you will have a piece that comes through that is nice and short. See if I can push this back through. See if you guys can see that at all. Just a short little piece sticking out. I myself, I'll take this little piece of the actuator here and I will hold it up here to make sure I didn't cut it off too long. I want it to sit up nice and flush with the wood. Okay? If you have it too long, it's going to pull away from the wood. It's going to bind up and not move very freely. This is a very important step here with all this. The tube has to be square with the plywood. This has to be square with everything else. So you got to make sure that you mark out these holes properly. You don't want this thing at an angle in any way, shape, or form, otherwise it will not move freely. The next step that you will then do is when you have your throw bar, that bar all hooked up through the top part of the layout, and this tube is flush, once again with the top of the ties, that mark that you put for the center, you will then just take and bend this piece down to the center. Okay, you'll stick that bar back into the top part of the layout. You guys will have to excuse me here as I'm doing this all one-handed. Give me a second here. I'm going to get this part right here done really quick. Oops, and I just dropped it. When you make this bend, you want this bend nice and tight with the end of the bar, with the end of the tube, so that when it's all done, it's all nice and tight, and that's what helps hold everything else into place coming across. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but this is just the way it will sit. Now, I don't have this right here done per se. Okay, I didn't do the top side of this because I want to get the bottom side done first. So you'll have this. You got your holes lined up. These ones are already pre-drilled. Okay. So I'm going to set this camera down here. You guys will have to excuse me while I try to adjust a little bit. Try to get you guys in the correct area here. Okay. And do just a little bit more adjustments. I'm very sorry about this, guys. Please forgive my not being prepared on all of this. Now you'll take your bar or your remote actuator, this lever, you'll then stick it up inside there. Okay, whoops. Then stick it up inside there, making sure that this point is down inside the hole, up underneath. Now when that piece right there in, on the underside of that bar, you can actually see a notch. Okay, this little notch that comes down through here, we'll see if you guys can see this, there's a notch that comes down through the bar. Now that bar, that's why we make that mark when we mark out for our holes, so that when we bend that rod, it comes down through the center of right where we want this. Okay. This bar will actually be too long for the application, but this is just for illustration purposes. You will then take the bar and line it up with the hole, making sure that everything else is all lined up with that tube. When you got your holes drilled out, I myself like to pre-drill these holes so it's a lot easier to do anything. I will then put my screws in. Once again, I use a number 6 screw. These are a number 6 by 3/8 because I'm only using 3/8 plywood, so I don't want anything to be able to protrude through the plywood and mess up anything that's up underneath it. Then I will just go ahead and screw these up in there. And when it's all done, this bar should be nice and square. It should not be kittywampus or anything else. It should all move nice and freely up inside there. Back and forth nice and freely. The next step would be for your cable. Now these ones are already done. But I noticed that with Circuitron, they label it up to 18 inches. However, the cable and tube are at 18 inches. So therefore you have less length. What I like to do is once when I get these mounted, I will find a place where it's closer for that tube and then mount them accordingly to be able to come up. Now when you cut this tube, what I do is I stick it through the first part of the actuator, making sure it's flush with the one side of it, so there's nothing sticking out. And then I will go ahead, I will tighten up this screw, run it down through the actuator, right where I'm going to have it, and I will take a razor blade and very, very carefully cut this. Avoid kinking. If you happen to kink the end of this tube, this wire will not come through here. This is very thin wire that comes through. And then as far as adjustment, what I actually do, we'll move this, is I will hold, you run your wire through, I make a bend and a bend so that the wire can't come out. So it's just two 90-degree bends coming out of the actuator itself. I'll run the wire through the tube, come down through here to the bottom of the tortoise. At this bottom hold down for the wire, I will have it loose sitting up inside of here so I can move this freely. And all I will do is just hold this down with my hand, with one hand, and then when I push on that, it will then push the wire at the other end down over here at the tortoise. I'll hold just a nice light pressure, and then I'll go down over here and I will tighten up this screw, making sure that I'm inside the proper notches down here and for the throw arm. Now once that's all done, you will have a nice smooth transition of the remote actuator itself. As you can see there, we're actually throwing a turnout up above. Okay, now remember that this is in the number 2 position. There's a little bit of play up here inside the wire, but that's okay. Now this is what I will show you guys. Let me crawl back up out of here really quick, and I will show you guys what the underside of my yard looks like. This is what I've done with my yard. There's just a few of them that come through, and the reason why I have done all this and run the remote tortoise mounts is because I have hidden staging up underneath. As you can see, I got all kinds of tracks that come up underneath by my turntable area. So you can do all kinds of different things with this. This is just how I did my layout and how I routed everything. I will take you guys over here to another side of the yard. Please excuse the mess. And here's the other side of the yard. These are all remote tortoise mounts. I'll get all my wiring done up on all those. I got more that are even further up underneath. But now when I go to throw that tortoise, we're going to throw these two here. We just turn this one. Now we're going to turn this one. We're going to close it. Now both turnouts are closed. We'll give you a different angle here. We'll turn out the one furthest away from us. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. That's just how all those right there work. Here's the top of it. This will be a finished product. How that bar looks when it comes through on all these. All my yard turnouts all have these coming through, as you can see. We are now getting ready to start running everything. I do not have one up on this one yet. However, the actuator is there. I just don't have the tortoise for this one yet, but it is there. I'll be working on crossovers at both ends of my yard, and be able to head down to my car shop and caboose track and a weigh station. Hope you guys all enjoy. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to ask or answer away, good or bad. It's the only way we learn about this. Once again, this is just how I have installed the remote tortoise mount and remote actuator. Whether if it's an actuator or the remote mount, this is just, like I said, this is just how I do it. I don't like how they gave us just a regular screw for the mounting plates. on the remote Tortoise mount. So once again, I used a number 6x5/8 screw, and just went ahead and drilled out the holes a little bit, and ran a little bit bigger hole going down through there. So what I use is number 71 bit to drill through my tie, a 1/16 for the brass tube to come through. Remember, it's second tie back. Here is I'll show you guys a Atlas turnout. The one was a Peco. Here's an Atlas that's done up. This one here's the second one back as well, right in between the two ties. And once this is all ballasted up, painted up, you really won't see it that much. The only other thing I recommend doing is putting just a little drop of glue on both sides of that, down inside them ties before you ballast. That'll hold that brass tube into place and keep it from walking around, just in case if you didn't go ahead and get that hole drilled out nice and square. That was one of the problems that I had in the first one that I ever did, so I ended up redoing it. So once again, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to go ahead and ask or answer or do whatever it is you got to do. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot from this, or I hope I was able to go ahead and help any of you out with the Tortoise switch machine and the Tortoise slow motion, or the remote actuator, excuse me. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.